You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week, we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week, we're joined by Amy.Kelly, the National Director of Family Engagement at Devereaux Advanced Behavioral Health, and her son, Danny.Kelly. Amy brings her professional expertise and heartfelt insights from raising three children, including her daughter, Annie, who has profound autism. Danny joins us to share his perspective as a sibling, his role in the Devereaux Sibling Engagement Committee, and the lessons he's learned supporting Annie and navigating family life. Welcome to the podcast, Amy and Danny Kelly.
Hey, thanks,
Thanks
Jeff.
for
Thanks
having
for
us.
having us. Yeah.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And as we were talking prior to the podcast, it's nice to be able to talk about that sibling perspective. We don't do it enough. We don't bring that
So
conversation
true.
enough. And there's such a huge impact in the role that you play in your sister's life. And we're going to get to learn all about that. And you're going to educate us. And I'm excited to hear that. But before we go there, I'd love to hear from both of you. And maybe, Amy, we can start with you
Sure.
about sharing that family story and maybe some of those key moments that you have that come to mind, maybe from childhood to the middle school years of life where
Mm-hmm.
adolescence is starting all the way through adulthood of raising
Yeah.
Danny, Annie, and Ryan.
Yeah, definitely. So first, it's such a pleasure to be their mom. I have to say, when I look at my family now that they're grown, it's pretty remarkable how what incredible young men they've turned out to be, and how our family was so perfectly set up. I didn't realize it at the time. It seemed hectic, and it's hard. You get this diagnosis. So Annie was diagnosed when she was just before she turned 2, and then Ryan was born 3 weeks after that diagnosis. So it was a really tough and a very emotional time for me. Back then, the stats were 1 in 256
Hmm.
8-year-olds with autism, and now we know it's 1 in 31. So, yeah, so, but both boys have always grown up with Annie's therapy right in the house all the time. I mean, it started in the house, and then she would go to a Devereaux approved private school.
Hmm.
That was life changing for us. And Danny can talk some about his perspective with that. But for me, it gave me the first place that, one, I felt like Annie was safe, and two, I felt like I had other parents that kind of got it. I didn't have any friends that had someone with a disability, and it's pretty isolating at the beginning, and throughout periods of it as well, because there's no, it's not just one easy, as like one easy path. You go through these bumps and things that you don't expect, and so, I think the therapy and the school had a very good impact. We had ABA therapy for Annie, which I think was the right thing for her. I know ABA can be, a hot topic these days, and it definitely was what has helped her become the person, the young woman she is, and given her the abilities to do some of the things that doctors really thought she wouldn't do, like read
Yeah.
and write. And yeah, and she is pretty incredible now as a young woman. Danny, do you want to chime in a little bit about some sibling stuff? I
Yeah,
could go
sure.
on forever.
Yeah, sure. So, as you were saying, Annie was diagnosed when she was 2, so I was 3, and that is basically saying that as far as I remember, I've had a sister with autism that's been diagnosed with autism. So, I think that for me, my whole life has kind of had that as my normal, having therapists in the house, and it's interesting kind of growing up and going to school and things like that. You come home and it's different than what other people are talking to you about when they do that, things like that. So I think that it's definitely an interesting perspective from the siblings' perspective, because with a parent, they've had a life before having a child with autism, right? And for me, it's almost like my whole life has been having Annie, which
Hmm.
total obviously so grateful for her and so
Yeah.
proud of all that she's accomplished. But yeah, I just would offer that as well.
Sounds like
Yeah.
it's really part of your identity. It's
Oh
it's
yeah,
you are Danny, you are your own man, you are your own person.
for
But
sure.
you always have this part of you that is a little bit of Annie. It's like it sounds like, that's always been that connection. And I'd love to explore just a little bit if we can, because you
Sure.
said that Annie was diagnosed at the age of 2,
Yep.
which is once again not always happening, but it's great
No.
that your family was able to do that. And but that means that at when you were 3 all the way through elementary school, is that your sister had all that attention coming into the house, and she had people that probably you saw as being like, hold on, these people are coming to play with my sister all the time. And not understanding some of that. And then also it's trying to be able to kind of get some of your family attention, some of your parents' attention. What is that, if you could even recollect, but like, what does that experience feel like?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, that's definitely something that is common, right? I think that there was a lot of attention that was given to Annie, and that's for good reason, right? She needs extra care and she needs constant people around her in order to make sure that she's okay. And for me, I think I was very fortunate to have my brother Ryan, and him and I were kind of in this similar situation where
Mhm.
I kind of had him to lean on, right? When I felt kind of isolated and wasn't receiving as much attention as Annie per se. So I would say that my situation was a little unique. Now, if I didn't have Ryan, I think I would have felt that more, right?
Mhm.
But I guess in regard, I'm lucky in that way. We would always just go outside and play games and things like that.
Yeah, so I think first the therapists were great about trying to bring Danny and Ryan into it. So first it was great for Annie, right? Because then it seemed like play with other
Mhm.
kids or with her brothers. And that was kind of a bonding thing and an opportunity for her to learn. They're her greatest teachers for sure. They taught her how to swallow a pill for the first time. We have it on video, and it was this great moment, and she still makes us watch when she swallows her pills, but we don't care. Um, but it's hard. I think Danny and I see things relatively similarly. It's hard as a mom to figure out how are you going to give time and attention to each of the kids. And I went through a
Mhm.
divorce, unfortunately, from their dad, and so as a single mom, it's really hard. I was working full time. I was back in school as well, getting a master's degree, and I had Annie full time, and then the boys would go back and forth with their dads, and so it was a lot of juggling. I would try and make dates with them when I could, so I had separate
Mhm.
time. But again, finding someone that understands Annie and could stay with her, right, and manage her behaviors at the time or whatever, that wasn't always easy as well. Um,
Mhm.
the thing that Danny has said before, and when we started talking about this when Devereaux started their sibling engagement committee, which is like a little arm of our National Family Advisory Board. And when we were having a conversation with Danny and the other co-chair, who is a board of trustees member, longtime Devereaux supporter, but her brother has since passed. So he was at Devereaux for many, many years and then has since
Mhm.
passed. And he was here back in the 80s, I think 80s, 90s. And so she comes from a different generation than Danny, where the parents did not talk about anything at all. Like, it was
Mhm.
kept much quieter. But Danny pointed out that he and Annie are going to have the longest relationship out of, if when you even compared to me, right? I brought her into the world, but I only am going to have this much time with her, right? And Danny is going to have a lifetime with her. And so that's another reason why it's so meaningful, I think. Right, Dan?
Yeah, I would agree. I also think that um, I always like to stay connected, right, and stay involved with Annie. And I know that sort of as I get older, and I know that we don't want this, but the responsibility does fall more on the siblings, and that sort of is a
Mhm.
reality as you get older to take care and to be a caretaker. So I think for me, I really just wanted to find a way to learn more about how to be a better caretaker and to just be involved. So that's sort of what
Mhm.
inspired a little bit about the sibling engagement committee.
Yeah, I would imagine just even sharing your story, because I mean, you say is that, you're a caretaker as you get older, but I would imagine just talking with other siblings is that each of these transitions in life, you have been probably trying to make sure you're supporting Annie through each of them. Is that whether it is going into, whether it's that the real youth stage period where it's just, how do I make sure that Annie has somebody to play with, somebody to engage with, and then into kind of how do I make sure that she has somebody social outside of me occasionally that I can help to kind of facilitate. And then as you become an adult, it's like, how do I make sure that I have all the right programs and resources and everything for her? It's like each step of the way, it sounds like there's a role for a sibling. Am I wrong on that, or is that kind of pretty accurate?
No, you're totally right. And I think that I will always have such a strong relationship with Annie, and that relationship kind of changes over time, right? It is, as you were saying, for me growing up with Annie, I felt like I was her friend, right? And we could
Hmm.
play together and do things. But as I get older, my first thought now is, okay, how am I going to help take care of Annie when I'm older, right? And how am I going to make
Hmm.
sure she's okay? So I think
Yeah.
it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I feel like it's, again, same very strong relationship, but my perspective on what to do, it has changed a lot.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Amy, you've done a wonderful job raising your children. If these are their thought processes on, how do I make sure I'm taking care of
I
my family the
know.
way that I need to? So great
It's
job.
Thank you. It's incredible to see. I mean, honestly, like this has given me, it's opened my eyes to again what incredible humans they've become, because these weren't
Mhm.
always things that we talked about. And my job has always been, I wanted to never make them feel like they had to take care of their sister, right? I worked really hard to make sure she got the waiver funding she needs, and so that they can be as involved or as little involved as they want, and I want them to have their own families and have some of this normal life, that I was able to have in my 20s. But again, just like Danny said, he said to me after he graduated from Drexel, and he took a job in Philadelphia, and he's like, Mom, I'm not going to move far away from Annie. I always need to be
Mhm.
nearby. And I was stunned, because he has the whole world ahead of him, right? And open to him at that point. And the fact that he wanted to stay nearby his sister is just so meaningful and touching for me as a
I was
mom,
gonna say that as a
Whew.
parent, that's like tears coming down the sides
Oh
of
yeah.
it.
Yeah, for sure. For
Do-
sure.
You had mentioned though that the engaging Annie in the treatment that she received with Deborah, the schooling that she received there, and kind of the wraparound care was so integral. But how does a sibling get engaged in those? Because I mean, it's you have Danny who wants to be a part of everything probably, and wants to be able to empower his sister and help her to be able to live every experience that she wants to be able to do and engage in the community. But that requires support and teaching for a sibling, I'd imagine. How do you make sure that that would be happening? Because there's so many transitional steps in lives where even as a clinician, we're still learning.
Yeah, yeah. And Danny, you can chime in as we talk about it. But I think so first, the therapist, I always interviewed the therapist before they would be part of Annie's team, because I needed to make sure it was a good fit with Annie um, and our family. And they were great about being creative and involving the boys. There was a point in time though where the boys didn't want to be involved anymore, right? Like after
Hmm.
school, they'd want to go play with their friends. One thing is Annie really hasn't had her own group of friends. I mean, Danny's friends have been Annie's friends. My friends have been Annie's friends, right? She doesn't have friends outside of like her school program that she was in, or now she's in a day program. And but they don't get together outside of that, right? It's not like Danny, who can go home and have cocktail hour with his buddies, or and his girlfriend.
Hmm.
Annie doesn't have that. So right now, any interaction that she gets with Danny or staff that are her age, she really loves it. I mean, and she always says, not mom now, not mom. And she holds out her finger, which I think is amazing because it's showing me her independence, right? And her advocacy skills. I've been really pushing like my choice and that kind of thing. Because as she's older and when I'm not going to be around, which is a really hard thing to think about as a parent, but I know that's going to happen someday. And I
Yeah.
want, my job is to make sure I empower her as much as I can.
Yeah.
Danny, what do you?
Neurodiverse or neurotypical. I think that that's what we all
Oh,
look
yeah.
for parents is like that level of independence, no matter what level it is, that
Yes.
level of independence is growing. And just the fact that Annie is saying, no, not mom. It's
Right.
like, it's like at one point it's like, oh, come on. But then you
Right.
like, you stop and think and like, awesome.
Oh, yeah. Well, first, I mean, there was a point at she didn't start talking until she was 10. So just to hear her say not mom is incredible, right? And she's got limited language, very short words, and she also has apraxia, so it's hard to understand her, but she figures out a way to get her point across and advocate for herself. I think, don't you agree, Danny, that like all of your friends and they're all still as friends, even though we've had stories like Annie walking out of the bathroom naked when he had a play date over, right? And Danny at the time was just like, it's just my sister, she's going to the bathroom, don't worry about it. And they were like, okay, and they just would go back and play or whatever. But that's still one of Max, I'm thinking of, is one of your lifelong friends, right?
Yeah, for sure. It makes me think of taking Annie to her prom, right?
Oh,
And
yeah, talk about that.
that was like a special moment where being a sibling, I felt really impactful in a way where
It's huge.
she was, how old was she? Maybe 10, 11?
Well, she had it for
that?
several years. Yeah, several years. So you actually she started school when she was 5. I think they had prom. And so I think you were 6 and 7 and 8. And then when Ryan was old enough, she got to bring both of her brothers as her dates, which was so great. So great.
Yeah, but I just think of when as Annie's brother, a good way to kind of, for me to get involved and to feel like I had a special relationship was through going to prom. Like Deborah did a great job of organizing all of that. And it was just a really cool way to, I don't know, get involved. And she felt very special, which I thought was great.
Yeah, I mean, just that level of inclusion, it's different for everybody. And like, when you're looking at how do I create an opportunity for everybody to engage the community, is that it's different levels of support, it's different access, it's different ways to be able to do it. What you all did to be able to give her that experience, it's amazing. It's amazing that somebody is going to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to make sure my sister gets this similar experience to what others might be receiving, and I'm going to find a way to do it. When you talk about your friends and their ability to be a part of Annie's life, not everybody understands how to interact with somebody who has profound autism. It's not always comes natural. It's not always something that they're able to do. How did you help your friends to, I mean, at times I would imagine is that they're hesitant or fearful that they're gonna make a mistake or do something. Like, how did you help support them so that they felt comfortable being a part of Annie's life?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think that is everybody has good intentions, right? When they're interacting with Annie, and that's really all that matters in my eyes. I think that I grew up interacting with Annie every day. So for me, it kind of came off natural, right? When I was in front of them doing it. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes my friends, they wouldn't know what to do, or they'd feel a little awkward.
But she also used PECS, right? Like a PECS book. So, and that's not a natural thing to know how to use that or how to read the strip, but she brings it over to you, right? So Danny,
yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Like that sort of natural awkwardness that comes from a different form of communication. I think that sort of, as long as it was a supportive environment and they knew that, look, like, I know this is a little different than interacting with someone else, but they would always do a great job. They were very good. Yeah. And they always tried their best, and they always had, like I was saying, kind of good intentions and wanted to talk to Annie because they knew how important she was to me as well. Right. So, but, and we were younger. So I feel like when you're younger, it's a little easier too. It feels a little bit more natural. So that could have been part of it as well. But yeah, I don't know.
That you're more accepting when you're young. Like you don't have those preconceived notions or judgments yet in your head from society wrecking you. So, you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that
Um,
community piece is so important. I mean, when we're talking about, and you had mentioned just that the stressors that really exist in a family's life as they're starting and learning and navigating, because everything is brand new, everything is slightly different than maybe what you had done with your child before, and everybody has to be a part of that village that's being supportive. How did those stressors and that dynamic, how did that affect your family, and how did that change over the years as maybe
yeah,
as the kids as maybe Danny and his brother were able to be more part of
yeah.
the everyday support?
So, I mean, I'll give you an example. We couldn't go out to eat ever uh, because it was just too overwhelming for Annie for so many years. And we would go through the Wendy's drive-through. And one day we decided to go in. I was like, we're going to go in. And the boys looked at me and they were like, what? And I said, we're going to go in. We're going to just try it. And they were like, wow, this is what it looks like inside. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Mother of the Year for taking your kids in Wendy's. But for our family, that was a huge deal, right? And Annie
Hmm.
did well, so we were able to stay. There were numerous times where we'd try a restaurant and Annie just couldn't handle it. And they didn't complain at all. We would just get our meals to go. We were like, we got to go because they saw, the antecedents of once it started rolling, this was not going to settle down and it was going to be disruptive. I
Hmm.
think, throughout life, I've seen them grow in one being able to assist. So getting her to regress from any kind of, challenging behaviors or outbursts. Like she would go calm right down with her brothers, kind of coaxing her. That happened over time as they got to know what to do and she was more in
Hmm.
tune with them. Um, I think they just have opened her world in a lot of ways. There was a moment in my life as a mom where my life shifted a little because I was a single mom, but the boys were old enough and big enough to chase after Annie if she eloped, and they could pull our beach cart through the sand. And so I was able to take my three kids to the beach by myself and sit down in a beach chair, which I never thought would happen. We always, I
Hmm.
mean, we look different at a beach. We always blow up a little baby pool for Annie. We still do this. And she puts her feet in and she'll have an umbrella over her and sit in her chair and listen to her music and whatever. But that's her version of the ocean. And that's what keeps her safe so that I'm not
Hmm.
out there trying to save her from drowning. And then the boys were able to go do their stuff. And I think it was a big moment for all of us. I don't know if you remember that so well, Danny, but for me, I was like, yes, this is huge.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I remember having to lug the many buckets of
I'm
water
sure
to fill
to
the
fill
pool.
up the baby pool,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, you can see the eye roll. See, there's a little of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sibling thing. Yeah, sure.
But that description that you just gave right there, Amy, of and I think that this is something that clinicians need to always understand, is that the family is the real knowledge source, and
Oh,
whether it's a sibling knowing how to help to de-escalate their sister or brother who's having a challenging moment,
yeah,
or whether it's the family help to know what I need to do to adapt to be able to open up the environment around my child to keep them successful, is that I think that partnership
yeah,
between a teacher, a clinician, a community member, and knowing that the family is there as their guide versus
yes.
you telling them what to do becomes so important.
Guide and equal team member, right? Like,
Yep.
don't forget about the value. They're the expert on that, youth or that individual
Hmm.
affected, as well as their family. So use them for that knowledge, right? To
Yeah.
make your
And
life
that
easier.
that same sort of strategy and that voice, I'd love to know from you, Danny, is that you were undoubtedly inspired to join the committee. People don't join a committee that's going to take their time and energy to just because they're forced into it. They're doing it because it's a passion. But how has it changed your outlook on maybe understanding others' experience, or how you can coach the other caregivers in the world, or those that are part of that person's community, what that experience needs to be or how it could be better?
Sure. So I, I think that there are a couple of things from the committee that we've really kind of learned and have grown from. And one thing I don't think I really realized until I had joined was just how important the transition is from the parents to the siblings as as Annie would get older, right? Or whoever the person is who has autism. I think I don't really realize how much is required in terms of knowing, right? You need to know all these things about what's going on, what Annie's doing, et cetera. And I'm still learning. And I think that's kind of why I really wanted to join this. So that would certainly be one piece. And then the other piece is just being able to interact with other siblings and being able to talk about all of our different viewpoints. And it kind of creates our own little community where we can exchange stories, and someone will tell me a story and I'll be like, I totally get it. Like I've been in a similar spot. Right. And I really think that those two reasons are kind of what inspired me to join it, and sort of the advice that I've started to learn from interacting with other people who are sort of going through similar stuff.
Oh, I was just going to say, Jeff, real quick, that I think it's so important for parents to hear this and realize siblings experience the very same emotional roller coaster that we do as parents, right? Often parents are drowning in their own stuff, right? Dealing with it, figuring out services, funding, whatever it is, and don't take a moment to really think about what is, their brother or sister going through. Well, it's a lot like what you're going through, right? And so we all need guidance or therapy or help, a community, a village to be there for you,
Absolutely. And nowadays, and maybe this is my ignorance, I don't know how the program is set up and how the committee works and how you're able to engage with siblings, but we have so much more reach now in a virtual world. You guys are across 12 states for Devereaux alone, but I mean, trying to bring in the whole community. Are you utilizing technology to make sure that you're getting even that much more input from other people?
Yeah, I don't think that this committee would even exist without Zoom, in all honesty, because
it's all remote right now, right? All
remote. Every member is in a different state, basically. So I think that one of the only good things that really came out of the whole pandemic was this virtual worlds that we now allows us to connect with people in ways that we couldn't have before. And being able to utilize Zoom for our meetings, I think, is huge, and really allows all of us to come together with everything going on in our lives and just hop on a call. So we're totally using that. And I really do think that the committee wouldn't be what it is today if it weren't for that technology.
It's so powerful to have so many voices contributing. And I guess, Amy, I'll ask you this question, just because you're part of a larger organization, and your child has profound autism, which is something right now that, it's not fully understood. The research as far as, how to be able to fully support, we need more resources for that. We need to understand better. But
we need research with individuals with profound autism in order to do that, right? So I'm working on that too.
But how does the dialogue, how does the experience for siblings, does having that diverse perspective, knowing that autism reaches a span of individuals, a span of skills, a span of behaviors that are all so unique to a person, does having these sibling committees being so broad in nature help to create that dialogue of, hey, you know what, we're all experiencing something, we're all advocating for something, but autism is never the same for any individual, and we need to make sure that we're supporting each person in the way that they need to be supported.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's similar with parents. So, and I'm so privileged that I get to, be sort of one of the primary people that can help our families when needed and have that interaction with them. The one thing that bonds us, it doesn't matter what level of autism they are, where on the spectrum they fall, but as soon as I say I'm a parent too, my daughter's 23, they're like, oh, you get it, and I think it's the same with the siblings. It doesn't matter. It probably doesn't matter about the diagnosis. Like someone could have a sibling with Down syndrome, right? But they probably went through some of the same things in life in terms of therapy or different schools, different school bus, probably, right? Like, who knows? But I think there's just these common things that is sort of the baseline for things. And then beauty kind of evolves out of that in an incredible way. It's, it's pretty neat.
one of the things as a parent, I have an adult child and a teenage child, is that I could tell you everything great that they've done, and I can celebrate everything that they're doing. But I think that it's also important for, I mean, siblings to take pride in what they've accomplished as far as being able to help support their brother or sister, no matter if it's neurotypical or if it's neurodiverse. Like, it's just, hey, I have helped to be able to make my sibling a better person and been a part of that world. And we all do it with our family, no matter who our family members are, we're helping to support. I'd love to hear from you, like, you know, what makes you most proud? You've gone through the entirety of Annie's life as a supportive sibling, and you sit back, and right now you're taking a brand new role of, I'm going to help coach other people. I'm going to help share that experience. But what makes you most proud as a sibling?
That's tough. There are a lot of moments in my life that I kind of think about with that. I feel like being able to volunteer and do things like this, and we volunteered at events around Philadelphia, which is where we're based. I think being able to do those growing up, and not just being a part of Annie's journey, but helping other families and being able to help sort of advocate for them as well. I think that has sort of been what I'm most proud of.
Hmm.
I also think, kind of like what you were saying, just being a part of Annie's journey and how far she's come today, it just feels very, I just feel very accomplished in knowing that I was just a part of that, because as my mom was saying earlier, no one thought that she was even going to be able to talk. And
Hmm.
she can talk now, not perfect. She's minimally verbal, but she's worked so hard. And I don't take any of the credit for all the work that she's put in for that, but
Hmm.
I take credit in being able to support her and be there for her just growing up and just see how far she's come today. So I think that that's the other piece, in addition to being able to volunteer and to help support
Hmm.
other families who may be going through the same thing.
I
I
love
also,
hearing that. I mean, it's so nice to hear a sibling be proud of not just who their brother or sister is becoming in life, but also what role they've played in that, and not shying away from the fact that, hey, you know what? There is some ownership. I played a big role. I was alongside my parents. I was alongside everybody else and helping to be able to prepare my sister for being able to do so many wonderful things in her life. And I'm a contributor to that. Amy, I'd love to just hear as well, because I know that you're a big advocate. And quite frankly, the autism world and the advocacy in the autism world is run by family members. And that's why
darn
it's
right.
so powerful out
That's
there.
right. Yeah.
But what advice would you be giving? Because I mean, Annie's going through another transition into adulthood.
Yep.
Life is different now for her, and you know
Yes.
what? You're trying to be able to unlock more, as I look on your background, human potential. You're trying to unlock
That's
more
right.
opportunity for her. But
Right.
what would you be telling families that are going through similar transitions? As an advocate, as a family member, how do they prepare for that? How do they secure that, in the future when my child is an adult, that those resources remain available?
Yeah. So there's a few things. I mean, um, I remember when we first had transition discussions, or we were having discussions about having the transition discussions coming up in a few years at the IEP meetings. It seemed so far away. But let me just tell you, you really can't start too early in terms of some of the things that you can do to help you. Once they turn 21, it's known as the cliff. And any entitled service that they had received, especially through education, that all stops literally the day they turn, 22, basically now.
Hmm.
Um, and I think a couple things I would advise families, no matter where you are in the journey and how old your loved one is, but every service that they are eligible for, that they need, I would tell them to do it, to take it. And
Hmm.
it is so hard for families to interrupt their life, right? And have people in their homes, or have to take time out and drive them to therapy, whatever it is. But what that does is a couple things. It starts, I mean, one, you are involved, right? As a parent, you get to see what's going on, what works, what might not work with your child. You can help shape that as a full team member, right? And remembering that they're the expert. You don't have to be the expert on the therapy, but you're certainly the expert on your loved one. But the other thing it does is down the road, when your state or county is looking at, what kinds of supports will this person need as an adult, if you have not taken those services because it was inconvenient for your family or whatever when they're younger, the county has no way of knowing that they're going to need an intense level of service. If it's someone like Annie who needs 24/7, care, my county would never have known that if I didn't sort of, air quote, prove to them, right, through the use of all of the services that she needed and had. Then they could see by the time she turned 21, they already knew, oh, Amy.Kelly's coming up on 21. Like we had a great supports coordinator who's basically a case manager for the waiver world. A waiver is some funding from your state to be able to have your adult child stay at home with you and you're waiving the right for them to go into an institution, basically, so they can stay with you and in the community. And if families don't do the services, they don't show that child needs it, or even that family, right? Because you can have family services as well. That's a real problem when it comes to asking your county later for funding. The other part is there's a huge wait list for waivers all over the country. Every state, basically has these enormous wait lists. And if you don't get on that wait list early, Annie was on it 11 years before she was even eligible. Now, there's waiver funding eligible in certain circumstances for people who are under 21, but the core of it goes for those when you don't have your entitled services as a youth anymore. So I think you really got to make sure you're getting on that wait list. Make sure you're utilizing medical assistance, because that's a huge other part of this, and a huge topic of advocacy right now in the autism and disability world, as it should be. We're very afraid of any cuts happening. So go out there and advocate. But so I think those two things for sure, and using those services are really important. And then, you know what, if you feel like you don't have as a parent, if you feel like you don't have a good team, or if not everybody's an active team member, change that. You're ultimately in charge of that. And I always felt like I'm CEO of company Annie, right? And so if the employees weren't doing their thing, the team members weren't participating in the way that they needed to, then we'd have to find a different therapist or whatever, case manager, whatever it was, who wanted to be invested and involved. I wasn't okay with just passive stuff. So yeah.
No, and I mean every bit of that is so important, and making sure that you're not hesitant to voice your opinion. A lot of times people get scared, like, oh, if I speak up too much, then I'm going to lose some of the service, or
well,
they're
there's
not
a
going
way
be
to
as
do it,
excited.
right? There's definitely a tactful way that you should learn.
Yeah.
I think one of the best resources and one of the first ones I read, you can probably find the book on Amazon now for dirt cheap use, but it was by Wright's Law, and it's called From Emotions to Advocacy. And what it did was help me channel all of those emotions, because I would cry a lot, and because it's hard at the beginning, right? You're lost. You feel like you should be helping. You're not doing enough. You never feel like you're doing enough. It teaches you how to channel all of that into healthy advocacy, where you can work with that team instead of, offending them or being too abrupt, where you're, just friction, and you're known as then the difficult family, right? And nobody wants to work with you. You want people to want to work with your family. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And to be a part of that team and feel like, the culture is that you're welcome as part of our caregiving unit, and that it becomes a broader group that is all focused around the same goal. So Danny, where can people get some of the resources? Is that finding these sibling groups is not always easy. Being able to connect with others is, as much as we find like, oh, well, it's so easy to hop online and get to something, is that you could find the wrong group and get misinformation very easily. It's nice to have a source that that you can trust. Is where can people access some of the information that y'all are sharing to be able to kind of start those dialogues amongst themselves?
Yeah, sure. Well, for one, the sibling group is open to not just Devereaux siblings, right? It's everybody. So you could join our group if you're interested, if you feel compelled enough. So
They can
we can.
email me. We'll give you my email to put in the podcast, and they can send it to me at my Devereaux email, and then I'll field it out to Danny and the other co-chair, and they'll take it from there.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So that, and then also our main project is to put together a toolkit for siblings so that if the responsibility falls on them to have to take care of their sibling or they want to become more involved, they can utilize this toolkit for whatever they need. We have like a glossary of terms and what they mean. We have some activities that you could do with your sibling if you have a day with them and you're not entirely sure what to do, along with sort of skills that you can help them build. So we're always open to ideas for what we can add to this, but we're starting to put that together, and that can also be a good resource for siblings in case they need something to engage with their sibling or they just want more support. So I would also say that, and join the committee if you are interested.
But what Danny's talking about is for adult siblings, obviously, as you know, siblings age together and become adults. For younger siblings, there are things called SibShops. Have you heard of those?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so it's a trademarked group. I was trained as a facilitator, actually, because I thought it was just such a wonderful idea. But it's usually for ages 5 through 12 or so. Parents can just Google SibShops near me and put your zip code in to see who has it. But what it is it's basically a structured environment where they usually have some playtime, like a snack, a craft, but it's led by either people like myself who are trained to facilitate these, or by therapists or social workers who have that training. And they lead the group, and it's an opportunity for these siblings to connect and realize they're not alone, right? And so instead of that one affected, sibling getting all the attention, it's a moment for them to go somewhere and have their own, time. And Danny and Ryan did those for a couple of years. And Danny, I don't know if you remember, but he came out one day out of the first ones, and he said, "Mom, I met this girl who has a brother who has Down syndrome, and they can't eat in restaurants either." And it was like he was so validated, right, and seen, basically. And I thought, wow, how huge that he's finding, like, he feels how I feel, right? When I meet a parent, and I'm like, oh, you get it. You have someone with autism in your life too. Okay. So so there are things for the younger, younger kids. And then there's also teen sibling groups. So parents just need to kind of Google to look what's in their area. Not all of those SibShops, I don't think those are remote necessarily, but this committee is that we're talking about. They may have changed.
Well, I appreciate, all of those resources sound like a wonderful starting point. And ultimately what it does is it gets somebody starting to think through and understanding others are going through similar experiences and not feeling like they're isolated and can ask the right questions. We'll definitely share those links on the podcast so that others can see not only what Deborah is doing and hopefully be able to join those groups, but also see what's local to them as well, to be able to understand how can they leverage both pieces, get a broad audience, and then also be involved in their own community. Well, thank you both for coming on today. I feel like it was a wealth of information, a lot that I learned. So I'm hoping that our guests learned quite a bit as well. And hopefully we can have you back on again sometime and talk a little bit more about some of these more tailored programs as they're developed, as that program is built out and that entire curriculum has been established. I'd love to see how it works and kind of what that looks like. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
We'd
for
love to
having
come
us.
back. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week. you.